Hello, and welcome to today's session. My name is Rodrigo Sanchez-Bede. I am the Senior Director of Strategic Ecosystems at Informatica. I manage our global partnership with Snowflake. Today, we will spend a few minutes discussing how Informatica and Snowflake complement each other to provide a highly governed set of solutions for customers that can dramatically improve business outcomes while reducing risk and increasing agility. We will also show a short but comprehensive demo of how that might be implemented using the City Bike dataset as an example. First, let me recap what you have seen in other sessions about how Snowflake already comes with very significant governance elements that allow you to know your data by centralizing everything in a way that eliminates all silos. It also provides customers with the means to control it using flexible governance and security by workload that can be centralized as well. And finally, how it's unified across the whole Snowflake platform, giving you centralized control so that everyone that's interacting with the platform has the same controls. We at Informatica have a similar approach when it comes to thinking about governance. What we want to do essentially is empower our joint customers to increase their trusted data use. It requires multiple people working across the organizational functions using multiple technical capabilities. So for example, you start typically in the CDO office by defining your policies and rules for data quality. This maps to having a unified security and governance map. But then you move into other things like discovering the source and data fields and where the rules should be applied coming from the governance office. That really maps to how well you know your data. Then you also need to have the ability to execute those rules and cleanse and enrich the data so that it becomes usable for your consumers, which again maps to knowing your data as well as controlling your data. It also means that you need to ensure that the data is protected both at rest and during movement, which again maps to having a unified view of both security and governance. And finally, to us, it also means that you have to have the ability to deliver the data to all the employees to support both analytic and operational use cases, which maps very much to having a centralized governance element. And none of these people, organizational functions, technical capabilities exist in silos. You need a common metadata layer to integrate and enable collaboration inside all the data that's in the Snowflake platform, as well as what's outside, upstream and downstream from Snowflake as well. And so to solve this question, we at Informatica have in market today 5 main pillars, starting with Action Data Management, which is a data stewardship and policy management mechanism that allows, again, the CDO office to settle those policies, to define their business terms in a glossary, and then use the catalog, which is the second pillar that you see there, to do the data discovery and cataloging, as well as making sure that things are implemented properly. And then having the data quality product to operationalize all these rules and making sure, again, that the data is proper for use, that it's fit for use. I think of it as having chlorinated water come out of your water tap. So when your consumers are, turn on the tap for data, the data must be usable from the beginning. And again, having the ability to implement data privacy and monitoring for policy enforcement is also fundamental. And all of these allow you to essentially have the holy grail, if you will, of data democratization, which is that everybody in an organization is allowed to, or empowered, to access the data and use it in their daily lives. And now, how this works together with the Snowflake elements of governance, which you guys have and are very strong in terms of security, metadata management, and more importantly, the ability to do data sharing and just having this new paradigm of how data is being disseminated across the organization and how they work together, essentially, is we actually complement each other very, very well. So Informatica's heritage has always been helping companies accelerate their ability to use data in the business layer by giving them these tools and these mechanisms that make it easier for the organization to sort of go through all these steps. And of course, we work closely with Snowflake, not just in data loading, but also in having the ability to scan the contents of the Snowflake database and databases, and understanding not just that, but also what's upstream and downstream of Snowflake as well. To be more specific, our vision is something that looks like this, where you have Snowflake at the center of your customer's data strategy. And then you have these elements around it that allow it make it easier for customers to adopt Snowflake and really make it a cornerstone of the data strategy. So let's take a closer look at some of these attributes that make this data democratization platform. Starting on the left, you want to have sort of data governance, which is a single pane of glass for anyone in the organization to answer key questions such as, what data do I have? What's the meaning of this data? What's the quality? Is it usable? Is it not? Who can use it? What is it? What can it be used for? Who's the owner? And who can help me? An integrated data governance solution is critical to drive successful governance and adoption of the data cloud. And then going to the right, of course, as we spoke about before, the data catalog enables the data management team, your architects and your data engineers, as well as your data analysts, to understand what data exists within the organization as well as outside the organization, what's inside the Snowflake data platform and outside of it. It helps the architects to design, to drive adoption, to perform impact analysis, and to report the evaluation of data with data asset analytics that we can see in terms of things like consumption metrics and data quality, as well as crowdsourcing of the usability of the data. Data quality is what you use to operationalize all these policies by essentially having the ability to not measure the quality of the data upstream as well as downstream, as well as support the data of data owners and data stewards to work with working groups to address business processes and systems that need remediation to improve the data quality. In addition, these metrics are constantly informing consumers through the data consumption layer so that they understand the degree of quality with data collections. This helps the data teams to build trust and transparency in their data product offerings. Because credibility can be easily broken when consumers have poor experiences with data collections from the data cloud, they will not adopt and build their own data estates if they cannot trust the data. So you want to absolutely avoid that. And finally, you want to have privacy as a key pillar. More and more governments across the world are setting up policies and rules and regulations around how the data can be managed. You want to have the ability to make sure that you A, have the policies, and B, have the ability to enforce those and prove to the authorities that you have the enforcement. And these privacy expectations are really good business practices, and many companies feel constrained in their self-service until they're addressed how to totally handle privacy. And then coming back on the left, all of these things enable data democratization. This is what helps you solve the problem of ubiquity, because you break down the silos, you make the data available to anybody in the organization with different degrees of permission depending on where they are. But again, you make it visible, you make it transparent, it makes it very clear who owns and who is a steward for the different data sets, and essentially ultimately empowers all the users in the organization to become data driven. The proof is in the pudding. We actually have 3 public references that you can use. Athena Health has spoken publicly at Informatica Clearview, which is our user event. Nissan North America is another joint customer that has spoken a lot around the use of Snowflake, as well as the use of Informatica governance. And more recently, Total Gas and Power in the UK has also participated, actually participating in the Snowflake Summit in EMEA to talk about their experience using Informatica and Snowflake. So with that, let's jump over to the really fun stuff, which is the demo. Before I tap into that, because we are showing you the experience across several parts of the organization, we're actually going to essentially showcase the products across 3 personas. One is going to be Diana Clark, who's going to be the data analyst or the data consumer that starts with the data exchange and tries to improve the outcome of her work by requesting a new data set. Derek Owen is going to be the data owner, the governance steward that is going to take the request, examine it, make sure that it's valid, and make sure that it is actually the right requester for the right data set. And then Steve Ames, who's the data engineer, is going to use the Informatica tooling to not just discover where the data is, but also do some things to maybe improve the quality and the usefulness of the data, and then ultimately send the results back to Derek Owen for analysis and for review, and ultimately make it back to Diana Clark so that she can get her work done. So with that, let's get going right away.
Diana Clark is a marketing analyst who is trying to figure out how to run a better campaign for the users of city bikes in New York. In order to get started, she logs into Snowflake as she has heard that the IT team have posted a brand new dataset with city bike usage to Snowflake's internal data share and made it accessible to marketing. In Snowflake, she can see that a new database has become visible thanks to the data share. Within the schema, she finds a table called trips and begins to review the data. She realizes that while the data does have valuable information about the usage of the different bikes, it does not really say much about the end users, and she needs more customer information. She will have to visit Axon's data marketplace to locate or request an enriched version of this data. Diana knows the data marketplace holds metadata representations of all the best datasets available for consumption, so she has a look to see if she can find what she needs. She can see a number of data collections which are popular amongst consumers, but there's no mention of bike ride data. She could click into one of the categories to browse through what is available, but as she's looking for something quite specific, Diana decides to go straight into a search instead. By filtering on glossary terms, Diana can choose to only display data collections which contain the specific columns she needs, such as trip duration, bike ID, and user type. She also chooses to filter based on rating, ensuring that only the top-rated data is pulled into her search results. The Citybike data collection looks promising. Diana can see that the purpose and rating seem appropriate, and the data quality is good. However, upon closer inspection, despite the slight discrepancy in the title spelling, it is in fact the same data as the data she saw in Snowflake. It does not have the additional customer attributes she needs for her project. Diana can see that this collection is not quite right for her, so decides to request a new one, explaining precisely what she is looking for. She specifies that this data needs to be enriched with customer attributes relating to the user's address, and she needs it to be made available via Snowflake. She also indicates that she needs this available within the month by adding a completion date.
Derek Owen is an active data owner who has many tasks to fulfill within Axon Data Marketplace. He has been notified that a new data collection request has been made and is waiting for his feedback, so he clicks into the request to review the details. Derek can see that this is a reasonable request from a trusted analyst. He is aware of the project that has triggered the need for this and has spoken to the CDO to get it expedited. He will get the appropriate data engineer on the case straight away to action this request. Steve Ames is a data engineer who has received a notification from Derek to provision a customer detailed dataset that is associated with City Bike rights into Snowflake, then merge the customer detail with the City Bikes rights dataset so that Derek can post an updated dataset in the Snowflake Data Exchange. To begin with, Steve gets to work and logs into the catalog to find the dataset Derek had specified. Steve can easily find the customer detailed dataset that is associated with the City Bike trips data by using Data Catalog's semantic search capability, as well as using filters to narrow down his search. When he finds the dataset of interest, or that looks to be of interest, he drills down and is able to find out more about this specific dataset. So for example, he realizes that this specific dataset is certified by another user or by a data steward in the company. He can do things like understand the different ratings from other users. He can look into the details of the columns and the different data types, as well as the data domains and the business glossary terms associated to the different technical terms. He can understand the distribution of value and value types in the data set. He can also look for columns that have similar content, which is derived from artificial intelligence mechanisms such as similarity analysis. He can understand what the unique keys are in the data set. And more importantly, he can understand the validity of the data by looking at the lineage and the provenance of the data. So in this case, he can tell that the result set is a join of a different set of columns. And in here, he can see some of the operations that are being run in order to generate the specific data set, which again gives him the ability to understand if this particular data set is the one that is going to be of use given the work that is being done to prepare it or to produce it. And from here, he's also able to understand how this fits in the overall picture of the data fabric in terms of the different data domains, the different views, the different users. He can look at the ratings from other users and even start a dialogue with other users and the administrator or the data steward. He can actually request a preview of the data by logging into the data asset if he has those permissions, and retrieve a sample set of the data set to understand and make sure that it is or not what he is looking for. Now, the data set that we were showing before is actually a very well developed and established data set, but we also want to show what happens when maybe he runs or decides that he needs a different data set that is maybe a little bit more raw or less well developed or well defined. So in this case, again, he goes back to the semantic search page, finds the data set that is of interest by using filters and other mechanisms, and he realizes that this particular data set actually does have some of the fields that I need, but the quality is very, very poor, and just in terms of data uniqueness and data completeness, as you can see there on the right. And so while this data set might be the right one, he is going to have to run some cleanup. So he picks the data set or the metadata about the data set and passes it over to Informatica Cloud Mass Ingestion, where he essentially is going to very quickly configure a mass ingestion job that's going to allow him to grab this data from the Hadoop data lake, is on HDFS, and load the data into Snowflake to run some to load the data and then run some quality checks and improvements. And so you can see here, this is a very simple 4-step process where he enters some definitions for the source, for the target, and then in this case decides to run the data once, but he could actually decide to run this job on a schedule. And going on to Snowflake, you can see that this data set is being properly loaded. And as we mentioned before, it does seem to be very complete, but it does have some quality issues, like, for example, the city labels are not consistent, as well as the phone numbers potentially are also not consistent. So he decides to then build a mapping, which of course for the purpose of this demo we've already pre-built, but essentially takes that initial raw data set, and as we will see, ultimately joins this to the city bike data set. But before he does that, he makes sure that the customer reference data set is of the right quality and can be used properly. So in this case, as you can see here up above, he has predefined a number of rules that essentially are going to make the data more usable by being more coherent and more consistent. In this case specifically, he is going to run a rule to correct all the entries for city to be all uppercase. And as you can see here at the bottom, he's able to run a test of the rule, and once he's satisfied that it works properly, he also then chooses another rule specification to, for example, make sure that the phone numbers all follow a 10-digit format without any dashes or parentheses. And again, this very simple rule, very common rule, very common use case. And again, he's able to test the rule to make sure that it actually does what he thinks it will do before actually making it part of the mapping. Informatica mapping essentially is this data flow that he's building here. And then ultimately runs a join to essentially join the city bike data set with the cleansed data set about the consumers, and loads the results sets into another third table inside Snowflake, as you can see here. Now, when it comes time to actually executing this mapping or this job, he has a number of choices. In this case, he's going to configure the job so that the Informatica Smart Executor will, in fact, try to push down as much of the workload as possible into Snowflake. So whatever Snowflake has the coverage for the different data quality functions or the different SQL commands that are generated by this mapping, they're going to run using the Snowflake engine. Otherwise, they're going to run on the Informatica agent. And once he creates the task, he just schedules it or makes it run. And then going out to Snowflake again, of course, we're accelerating this in the demo a little bit, but the resulting set, as you can see here, now has has not just the city bike data of all the individual trips, but now he has augmented the data set with a cleansed view of who these different customers are, and more importantly, where they came from in the United States, as well as usable data around the city and the phone number that they used. And you can see here that all the rules are met. Now that the data engineer has created the relevant data collection and made it available in Marketplace and Snowflake, Derek can update his consumer with the good news. He informs Diana that the collection is ready for her review and consumption, and tags the new data collection so that she will know exactly where to find it.
Diana can track all her open orders on the My Orders page in Marketplace, but as this was a request for new data, it's stored in the Request section. The status clearly shows it has been fulfilled, and by clicking into the request, Diana can get the full details. Here she can see the details of not just the old data collection, which her request was based on, but also the newly created one, named Bike Data with Customer Details. The data collection looks good at a glance, with customer details mentioned in the purpose, and the data delivery default method set up as Snowflake. To ensure she has all the attributes she needs for her analytics project, Diana opens up the dataset to see the attributes within. Immediately, the enrichment is clear, as there are far more attributes than in the old dataset. If she scrolls through them, she can see that more than just journey data is present. Customer data has been included as well this time. The data quality also looks good, both at the attribute level and aggregated by rule. She can see that there have been stringent quality checks, and her data is fit for purpose. Clicking into the policies allows Diana to ensure she will be using the data in the right way. Diana can see through the policies and usage guide that she must be careful with this data collection, as it contains personally identifiable information and therefore is subject to regulations such as GDPR and CCPA. There's no rating on this data yet, but that is expected as it has just been created. Diana can rate it herself once she has used it. She chooses to check out the data, explaining that she will need it for her analytics project, and selects to receive it via Snowflake, her preferred data exchange platform. As the data is already on Snowflake, she expects access to be granted very quickly. In order to submit her request, Diana must agree to adhere by the policies that govern the data she will receive. She is effectively entering into a data sharing agreement with the owner that she will act in accordance with their policies. Later on, when Diana checks back on the progress of her order, she sees it has been fulfilled. After a quick conversation between herself and the data owners, they were quickly able to add her to the correct data share in Snowflake, making the data immediately available. Here in Axon Data Marketplace, there is a clear record of what has taken place, evidence of her approved access and policy alignment, and a link through to Snowflake where she can view the data directly. In Snowflake, Diana can see the dataset made available to her. There's a new table called Trip Details, which includes data about the user. So the City Bike data is available, enriched with the customer data she needed to make her next campaign her best ever.
Well, that is it. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope this was useful to you. It helped you illustrate how we can work together to really bring to market a very powerful joint idea of how we can use Snowflake and Informatica together to build this highly governed data cloud for customers. I wanted to just finish off by inviting you to try some of this out for yourselves. If you have Partner Connect on your demo account, you can essentially avail yourselves of an Informatica account. Please reach out to me directly. You see my email right there, or check us out on informatica.com/snowflake if you want to find out more. Thank you.